Thank y'all. Good morning. Man, I'm glad you're here. We need the peace of gathering together, don't we? It's been rough, really. Not to complain about rain. I'm a Texan, but I was at the gas station filling up, and the guy, didn't know him, at the pump across from me, just began to pour out his heart about how stressed he was, how discouraged he was, and he just said, I think it'd all be better if we could just see some sun. And I thought, really, that's us, isn't it? We can get caught up in a moment and say, man, if only the skies were blue, if only things were better, then we could just be happier. And that's a lot of the way we're made. It's the way that we work. And we can get caught up in news, and we can get caught up in situations. And, well, I want to illustrate it between the difference between like a balloon and a billfold. And I'm not talking about the one that floated across the country. That was enough news, right? But it is interesting how we can all get caught up in things like that and have opinions and get spun in one direction or another about current events. And, you may say it's silly, but, think of it like this way. I mean, have you ever seen a child, they get a balloon, maybe they're at a fair or a birthday party, and they walk out to the vehicle and they're not holding on tightly to it enough, and a gust of wind blows along and yanks the balloon out of their hand, and it begins to float away. What does the kid do? They start to cry, right? They're like, "Wah!" And as an adult, you look at them in that situation and you think, it's just a balloon. But I heard a comedian one time say it this way. He said, yeah, but imagine if you were, walked outside on the way to your pickup and all of a sudden, you took your wallet out and it began to float up into the sky and a gust of wind caught it and carried it away. What would you do? You would cry and you would feel helpless and you'd say, I want it back. See, it's all a matter of perspective. All of us are just one story or situation away of feeling like things are topsy-turvy and upset and it's not smooth sailing anymore. And I want us to kind of look at that today. We're going to be in the Gospel of Mark, the end of chapter 4 and part of chapter 5. And we're going to talk about what it's like when we feel blown around by the circumstances that are beyond our control. And I want to say we need to remember Jesus when we're at those moments. When you feel overwhelmed by evil that you cannot contain, remember Jesus. And when you remember Jesus, I want you to remember what it costs for his activity of peace to be spoken into our lives. Would you bow with me in prayer? God, we need peace and presence today. And we don't have to beg for it. I pray it often out loud here, God, just a reminder to us that we didn't have to get you here. You have come here. And not just in this room, but you came to the entire earth. And you've come into our hearts. God, what I'm praying for is that we would remember you are with us now. In Jesus' name, amen. We added something to the first page this week. It's called a QR code. It's that really tiny thing that looks like a crossword puzzle done wrong. And you can just aim like your smartphone at it and click on the link that it takes you to, and it'll actually open up the sermon outline. But if you're a person that wants to stick with paper and pen, on the back it is as well. And you can kind of hang on to that and follow along and know things that are going on. But again, today, we live in a world of conflicts and evil and destruction. And, we need peace. And we need to remember that Jesus is the one that brings peace. So we're going to look at a couple of stories. We're moving through the Gospel of Mark. And there's a couple of them here. One in the end of the 4th chapter that finds Jesus with his disciples. They've been at Capernaum. They've been at teaching. And Jesus is like, hey, let's go over to the other side. And it's not just a kind of a random thought by Jesus. I mean, he knows what he's called to do and where he's called to go. We get that. He's got a purpose for what he's doing. But, sometimes, as Southwest Airlines says, you just got to get away. And so Jesus and the they leave the crowd behind, and there's some other boats with them, which is interesting. This is never brought back up in the story. And a storm comes up. And having been at the Sea of Galilee, I've been there where the winds were blowing for a little while and the waves crash against the shore and boats get tossed around, and just a little bit later, it's smooth as glass. And if you're a person that's a boater, you know it's much better to be on smooth surface. And so they're there, and the storm rises up, and Jesus back there by where the guy that'd be steering the boat would be is just, he's back there by the old Evinrude, sacked out. Right? He's asleep. The boat's tossing. The waves are crashing. The disciples are soaked. And Jesus is sleeping. Right? And they say to him, "Teacher," now this is interesting. I want you to remember that's what they call him at this point, Rabbi, teacher. I want you to hear that for the rest of the day. Just remember, they call Jesus teacher. "Don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." The wind died down and it was completely calm. Awesome. Now, how many of you have heard this story go another direction about how Jesus can just bring calm and peace into your life? It's a great application, but there's more going on here, right? Let's stay with the truth of the story, because the disciples that were calling him teacher, he begins to teach them, and he says, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" See, it's really a story about the people in the boat, not just about us in a topsy-turvy world, right? It's about them not knowing who Jesus is yet. And hearing Jesus teach, seeing miracles done by Jesus. And then it says they were terrified and they asked each other, "Who is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." You see a little learning going on. Maybe that's a good lesson for us really to take away from it is, whatever you think Jesus is like, whoever you think he is to you, you can still learn more. You can still have an experience where it seems like things are out of your control, and it is not a disaster, but rather an opportunity to experience Jesus' power and authority and peace and presence in your life. I mean, that's really the change that happens there. It's not just about Jesus being a magic word that you can say and everything is good. He's not a good luck charm. He's not Jesus the rabbit's foot. He is the Son of God. He is the one who has been the creator. And what is this natural occurrence of a storm? He speaks his authority over it. Then the story goes on. It says they go across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. And then it says, when Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. Now, we talked a little bit about what that is, evil spirit, impure spirit. Again, this is writing 2,000 years ago, an understanding of a man who is tormented and tortured, that there is something in him, not just mentally and physically, that is difficult, to put it kindly. But he has this, he lives in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. Now you're going, this gets pretty amazing, right? I mean, when I was in high school, I worked in Dallas County Courthouse in Criminal District Court number 4. And one time there was a guy in the holding cell before he was to be brought into the courtroom that claimed to be God. And in his rant and in his rage in this little holding cell, he reared back and with his prison flip-flopped foot, kicked the jail cell door open. The bailiff told me a pickup truck hitting it at 30 miles an hour shouldn't even be able to do that. But yet the guy mustered all of his strength up and kicked it open, saying he was God. The only problem is God broke his foot, his ankle, and 2 other bones in his leg in doing that. But I get what this is saying here. This guy is, well, for lack of a better term, possessed. Possessed by certainly the damage may be done by his own desires. That idea of an impure spirit is one who may have begun just a little bit in a sinful life and then found it to become an addiction. Just dabbling a little bit. If I look at a little pornography, well, maybe it won't really affect me. Or if I get involved in using this substance to make me feel better, maybe I won't really become addicted or an abuser of it. Are you tracking with me? Maybe if I see just, oh, here's this one person, I'm going to use them for my purpose, my gain. I'm going to just tell a little lie to them so that maybe they'll benefit me. And before you know it, one sin upon the other, one open door for evil to take control of your life certainly does become a possession by evil. So I'm not saying this man is not demon possessed, but I'm not saying it just happened. We don't know. We don't know his story, but the people knew him. He had some kind of relationship with them. They tried to chain him. They set him off in the side right there on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, kind of across from Capernaum. You could see it from across the other side, several miles away. And he is there, and he comes running to Jesus and says, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." That's when we find the declaration of Jesus Christ, who has stilled waves and winds against the natural, able to speak to the supernatural. That same voice has authority in both realms. And so this man, who is under the control of evil, who is under that possession that is in him, then responds to him as Jesus says, "What is your name?" He says, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged Jesus again not to send them out of the area, them, plural, out of the area. And some of you have heard this story so many times. You've got this idea of it. And you know the rest of the story. There's these pigs there, which Gentiles would have, not good Jews, right? They were over on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. That's where the Gentiles lived. There were Latin-speaking Romans and others that were there, had gathered at that place. And he says, "Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them." And Jesus gave them permission. Are you again hearing the authority of Christ? He gave them permission. He can calm wind and waves, and he can tell demons where to go. Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them. Jesus gave them permission. The impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, gives you some idea of the mass of demon possession in this man, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Right? We know that story, but look what happens next. It says, those that were tending the pigs ran off, right? And reported this in the town and countryside. And we could kind of camp out on what their motivation was, but I'm sure they're just frightened and they don't want to lose their job. It's their job to make sure the pigs didn't do that something didn't come and kill the pigs. But they run off and say, "Hey, here's what happened." And everybody else came out to see what had happened, right? That's what we do. The crowd comes out, and when they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legions of demons sitting there, dressed in his right mind, and they were afraid, astounded, amazed, confused. Just pick a word. It didn't make sense. It didn't line up for them. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. One commentator speaking on this says this man, this Gentile, was the first in Mark's gospel, speaking along literally, to say, "Hey, this Jesus is the Son of God." It didn't come out of a a Jewish mouth. It didn't come out of a religious leader. It came out of this man roaming among the tombs in an unclean area where a Jew wouldn't be, being a Gentile, being unclean. He was the one who was definitely not the candidate for the first one to say, hey, that Jesus is the Son of God. But he becomes this living parable, this example of what Jesus Christ could do in a life turned over to him in an astounding way. He becomes the Hell's Angels, drug-dealing, murderous, psychopathic testimony that you hear at revival meetings, right? That kind of stereotypical kind of testimony that occurs. But there's more going on here because these accounts are not parables, nor are they metaphors. These are real encounters of people in trouble and in fear calling out to Jesus. I mean, I think it's really important we do that. We don't just turn them into a good sermon illustration or a Bible study or something that we just kind of turn into, Jesus calms the storms of our lives. I mean, yes, he does. But let's remember where it's really coming from. For blessed are those who are in trouble, for they shall call out to and hear from Jesus. Right? You see, if you want peace, you can receive it from Christ, but you need to know that it comes at a cost, right? It really does come at a cost. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said when Christ calls a man, a person, a man, a woman, boy or girl, when he calls them to follow him, he bids them to come and die. He says, you got to die to yourself, right? I mean, you can't just say, I want Jesus to be a slice of my life. You can't just say, Jesus, I want you to save me, but you get like 1 hour on Sunday, hopefully not longer than an hour if there's something I need to do that afternoon. He's not a slice of the pie of your life, man. You're making him the entire pie plate. That's what you have to do. It's all there. And so I want you to know that if anybody also told you that coming to Jesus meant everything in your life would work out and everything would be perfect and you would have great health and your bank account would be full and people would love you, I'm sorry. That's not what Jesus calls us to. Now, granted, living a life of obedience to the commands of God can lead you to be a better person, right? I mean, who doesn't like somebody that, won't kill them or steal from them or lie to them, right? I mean, people that have good character, and that's a great way to be, but it doesn't mean life will always be easy all the time. We don't have any story that the disciples never had rough sailing again after this. In fact, we know 10 of the ones in the boat were killed for proclaiming Jesus as Lord later on. So you can't just say everything was sunshine and roses from there on out. But it comes at a cost, but it brings with it a calm. I mean, isn't it nice to just be able to say, no matter what is going on, God's got this? God's got this. If I sink to the bottom of the sea in the storm, God's got this. If I spend the rest of my life stuck among stench, God's got this. If I rise to the top and people think I've got it all together because, I'm famous and I'm a celebrity, but inside I know I'm crashing and fractured, God's got this. It doesn't matter who you are or where you are, there is this peace process for your life that the amazing Jesus Christ brings. There's going to be some pictures up there of the Sea of Galilee that I took. That one, no kidding. A few hours later, you'll see one where it's calm. That's the Sea of Galilee, where it's there. The storms are crashing and the wind is blowing. But presence of Jesus is sought in the midst of a storm, right? That's the way it needs to happen. We find from the disciples, they identify what their problem is. They explain what their fear is. The same thing with the man among the tombs on the Gerasene shore. He says, this is it. I am possessed. I am out of control. Jesus, help. And Jesus takes care of the storm, which, by the way, somebody that really knows about insurance, could you explain this to me? If Jesus is in the work of like calming seas and stilling winds, why when a hurricane comes through and wipes everything down, the insurance company calls it an act of God? Just chew on that one for a while. You see, the presence of Jesus Christ is sought in the troubling times of life, is it not? And when we seek Him, we surrender ourselves, our ability. That's this peace process we have to have. We surrender. We can't fight. We can't make it happen on our own. It doesn't matter what you think you can handle. You really probably can't. God can. And we seek His salvation in us. For like the storm, we cannot calm it. Don't walk outside and try to do so. And like evil, we cannot chain it. But God can. I've read the end of the story. I know how this goes. Yeah, you can say, well, those demons went into pigs. God's work wasn't done. I've read the end of it for all eternity. The devil and all of those with him spend forever locked away and cannot touch those who belong to the Lord Jesus Christ. In the meantime, we struggle, and it is real, but we can have peace when the presence of Jesus is sought. Another thing we need to remember is that there is power in this, and really sometimes the most power is shown by the one who has the ability to turn something off. How many of you have a hard time turning it off? Right? And so we have this power to turn off a phone. We have this power to turn off a television. We have this power to turn off a bad relationship. We have this, but the power of Jesus is greater than all of that, for He can still the wind and the waves, and He can silence the voices in the minds of a man possessed, and silence the hearts of ours today in everything that has poured into us. For I don't know what is upsetting the keel of your ship of life right now. What's rocking it and splashing it and giving you fear. Some of you I do. I mean, I love you and I'm grateful to know some stories and to know what's happening in life, but I don't know all of them. But remember, again, and this is preaching cliche, Jesus is in the boat, right? Remember that. Don't be the dumb disciples. Remember who Jesus is. Remember He is with you through that. And I don't know what kind of shape and chains you've gotten yourself into, how you surrounded yourself by the tombstones of bad decisions in your life, and you feel like every voice in your head tells you that you're a failure, that you have messed up, and you're listening to this voice that tells you to do what you know you should not do, and to not do what you know you should do, and you are tossed about by the legion of voices in your head. I don't know about all of that that's going on with you, but know this, Jesus has the power to speak peace. Now, I want to step aside from preacher here to another side is this. This is not identified if this man has a mental health issue, but there are such things as that, right? There also are certain physical ailments in you that certainly can cause you difficulty in your life and feel like an overwhelming storm. For both of those, there is help, right? I mean, really, get that kind of help, but don't separate that help, the medical help, from the spiritual help of Christ to speak into those moments. For we need that. His power is shown. We sang about it a while ago, right? We speak Jesus into these moments of life. And so we know that Jesus' presence is sought, and so it brings this beginning of peace. We know that His power is shown over that which causes unrest. But for peace to take hold, we've got to depend on it. We got to talk about it, and we got to give it away. For what both of these stories wind up with is the declaration that the proclamation of Jesus Christ is shared. Right? Right? It is shared. Knowing about Jesus is great, but keeping it to yourself is not the job of the disciple. We must tell people who Jesus is, who he is to us. And that comes from a direct experience that you've had with him. You can't say, hey, let me tell you who Jesus is to my preacher or my Sunday school teacher or my mom or my dad or my wife or my husband. No, or my friend. No, who is Jesus to you? Right? Who is Jesus to you? Is he the Son of God? Is he the one who died on the cross for your sin? If it was only you, he would have done so. Is Jesus the one that God proved his power over death by raising him on the third day? Is he the one who has spoken peace into your heart and a promise of his return? Is that the Jesus that you know? It is the one I know. Oh. We know Jesus. And that man became a living illustration among the Gerasenes. Jesus left him here, didn't let him get in the boat, and he became a living illustration of what Jesus Christ has done in his life. And you know what? So can all of us. Yeah. So can every one of us. The change in us is that radical that we can tell others what he has done for us. Now, in closing today, we need to remember this. There are a couple of points I just want to bring out right here at the end. One is that we cannot do what the people in the Gerasenes were trying to do, which was trying to tie evil to a location or a situation to be avoided, right? Now again, I'm just going to tell you, when people ask how old are you, I'm old enough to remember this thing being said. Kids, lock your doors and roll up your windows. This is a bad neighborhood, right? Now, like all the parents with little kids, just push a button, right? Lock the doors and roll up the windows. As if somehow that insulating situation will remind us that whatever difficult place and where we're finding ourselves, that's where it's tied to. Like it only happens there, right? In those places where it seems so obvious. And we grow very comfortable with the bad neighborhoods in our life. But you might want to remember, there's probably somebody that locks their doors and rolls up their windows when they pass by you. Right? But so we can't tie it to a place because we all need peace, right? Now, the difficulty for the people in the Gerasenes is that they probably were comfortable that all the evil was happening in that one guy, and they felt better about themselves because of that. But the rest of the story tells us they were more concerned about the pigs than that poor man. So, blessed are those who admit they are in trouble, for they shall cry out and receive Jesus' peace. Today's legion are the many voices that speak to us and through us in media, culture, community. I want to speak to our teens today, but not just them. I want to speak to grandmas. Y'all know Facebook was started by a college student who just wanted to find a way to describe which girls were cute and which girls were not, right? And yet, somehow it and social media has risen to be this echo chamber where you can find people that will spin up with whatever idea or attitude or approach that you have. And so those voices are there for you. And really, probably it should have just evolved to be a place where grandmas could post pictures of grandkids. Oh, and cats. Because you can't chain social media. And as long as it makes money, like the pigs did for some, it will be conveniently used, but pay the price. that some would say is too high a price to pay. Jesus, they said to him from the shores of Gerasene, leave us. What voices do we find ourselves listening to that we don't want to pay the price for turning them off? And we say, Jesus, don't touch this. Leave this alone. Because then it can give us this false sense of security that we know where evil is. And we can figuratively roll up the windows and lock the doors. Or pass by on the other side and miss the moment to see Jesus at work. So the question I have to ask you today is your comfort with known evil greater than your willingness to risk the cost of the calm that Jesus will bring into your life? For that really is the price to pay for being a follower of Jesus, is it not? To be able to say, I'm willing to turn that off. I'm willing to stop depending upon self. I'm willing to run to Jesus and say, Jesus, help me. I don't need the waves. I don't need the wind. And I don't need the demons. I need Jesus.